Hi, everybody. Welcome to Child and Adolescent Grand Rounds. I am so happy to be here to introduce one of my dear colleagues, Dr. Elizabeth Laugeson. She's a clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences here at the UCLA Semel Institute. She's a licensed psychologist and the director of the UCLA Tarjan Center, University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and is the founder and director of the UCLA Peers Clinic. For those of you who don't know about Peers, it's an outpatient hospital-based program providing parent-assisted social skills training for individuals from preschool to adulthood. She also serves as the program director for the pre-doctoral psychology internship program in autism and neurodevelopmental disabilities at UCLA. Dr. Laugeson has trained tens of thousands of mental health professionals, educators, and families worldwide, and is dedicated to developing and testing evidence-based treatments to improve social skills across the lifespan and across the globe. As one of the only empirically supported and internationally recognized social skills programs for neurodivergent youth, her program is currently used in over 150 countries, and it's been translated into over a dozen languages. We are so honored to have her with us today, and probably in addition to all of the amazing things that she's done for UCLA and for families throughout the world, she's also a really dear colleague and a wonderful human being. So we're so pleased to have her here. One quick thing, if you have questions, Dr. Laugeson has agreed to answer them. At the end, she will spend some time going through the Q&A with us, but please just put them in the Q&A throughout and she will get to them. For now, let me introduce Dr. Liz Laugeson.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Mogul for that kind introduction. It's lovely to be introduced by a friend and colleague. And thank you to the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Division for the opportunity to present to the group. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some strategies for handling bullying. Unfortunately, we know bullying is very common among youth. And also, unfortunately, we've discovered that youth don't always get the best advice when it comes to handling bullying. So we're going to equip you with lots of great strategies today for combating this issue. As you may have seen earlier, my disclosure statement is here, but I do want to mention that I do receive book royalties from Taylor and Francis and Wiley and Sons, and I also receive research funding from the National Institutes of Health, Autism Speaks, and the Administration for Community Living. In terms of what I'd like to talk about this morning, I want to begin this talk just briefly defining bullying. You know, bullying is a kind of a complex concept and includes a lot of different behaviors. And so we'll begin with defining bullying and also talking about some of the consequences of bullying and peer rejection. I'll give you a little overview or background about the peers intervention, which is really the focus of this talk in terms of some of the prevention strategies or intervention strategies that we'll be discussing. And specifically, we'll be talking about strategies for handling both direct and indirect forms of bullying. I'll wrap up the lecture with some overview of some research on the program and then also some resources for moving forward. So when thinking about the definition of bullying and what that actually means, bullying is really considered to be a subtype of aggression, and it's characterized by these negative actions either to a person or to a group of people that are repetitive, chronic, sort of ongoing, and also characterized by a power imbalance. And it's important to understand that because, you know, if someone just sort of teases me, that doesn't necessarily mean they're bullying me. You know, it also has to have these other characteristics. The strategies we might use might be different based on whether it's actually bullying. So what are the different types of bullying? Well, I referred to sort of direct and indirect forms of bullying. Specifically, direct bullying would include things like verbal bullying. So that would be teasing or name calling in person, and also physical bullying, which is more of the aggressive acts, things like hitting, kicking, pushing, shoving. But it also can include things like stealing or pulling practical jokes or pranks. Those are all direct forms of bullying. They're sort of happening in our presence. Indirect bullying happens outside of our presence. And so that includes things like relational or social bullying. That's more often including things like rumors and gossip, and then also electronic bullying, which we more often refer to as cyberbullying. So you see, those are very different behaviors. And of course, because those are such different behaviors, the strategies that we're going to suggest are going to be completely different based on the type of bullying. Now, what are the consequences of some of these types of bullying and also of peer rejection during adolescence? Well, we know that peer rejection and bullying are really some of the strongest predictors of mental health problems later in life. So in particular, depression and anxiety are strongly predicted by peer rejection. What that means is if you want to predict who's going to be depressed or anxious later in life, go into a typical middle school or high school and look for the kids who are being rejected and bullied. And that's going to be one of the strongest predictors of those mental health issues. We also know that peer rejection and bullying strongly predicts things like loneliness and low self-esteem, substance abuse, poor academic performance, and even early withdrawal from school. And at its worst, suicidal ideation and suicide attempts are strongly predicted by things like peer rejection and bullying. So clearly, this is something that we need to address. So this sort of brings us to the Peers program. And just as a quick background, if you're not familiar with the program, we developed Peers back in 2004 here at UCLA. Initially, it was developed as a program targeting friendship skills for autistic adolescents. It was a parent-assisted program. And since then, the program's expanded quite a bit. It now includes school-based curricula. We have a young adult program. And Peers is used in over 150 countries, as Dr. Mogul mentioned, and has been translated into over a dozen languages. And includes over 75 peer-reviewed research papers. We also have other programs besides those that relate to adolescents and adults. We have a Peers for Preschoolers program, as well as some research programs currently underway investigating Peers for Careers, which is a college to career transition program, Peers for Dating, and also a drug treatment trial, Peers L-DOPA, that we worked on with Dr. Jim McCracken, which I'll mention later. What makes Peers unique from other programs is that it's one of the only evidence-based social skills interventions. It has this parent or caregiver-assisted component where parents and caregivers are taught to be social coaches out in the real world. I should mention it's only appropriate for socially motivated teens and adults, those who want to learn the skills. We wouldn't want to force these skills onto anyone. We're also only teaching ecologically valid skills, meaning that we're teaching what works in reality and not what we think that teens or adults should do in these situations. And as mentioned before, Peers is one of the few cross-culturally validated social skills interventions. Now, these are some of the targeted skills that we teach in both our teen and adolescent programs. Lots of skills related to friendships and romantic relationships, things like finding and choosing appropriate friends or romantic partners, conversational skills, and so forth. With relation to managing conflict and rejection, though, which is what we're talking about today, we have very specific lessons on handling direct and indirect forms of bullying. So that would be things, again, like teasing, physical bullying, cyberbullying, and rumors and gossip. And so that brings us to the skills. And so I'm going to spend the majority of this talk really speaking on this issue of what do you do if you're being teased or bullied. And we'll start with direct bullying because really this is the most common form of bullying really across the globe is teasing. And if you think about this, what do you think most young people are told to do in response to teasing? Well, this is where those ecologically valid skills become really important because a lot of young people are actually told to do things that don't work in reality. And so when we ask this question, most young people will say that they're told to either ignore the person, walk away, or tell an adult. And then we ask them if those strategies work. And, what they typically will say is no, that they don't really work that well. Well, if you think about it, none of those strategies are actually ecologically valid. If someone's teasing me and I walk away, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to follow me, right? And they're going to keep teasing me. And if I ignore them, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to keep teasing me. And if I go tell somebody, now what are they going to do? Well, now they're going to want to retaliate against me. They're going to try to get back at me because I tried to get them into trouble. And so none of those strategies are very effective, unfortunately. But if you look at research that shows what does work, in reality, most people who are successful at escaping teasing do this very simple thing. They just give a very short comeback that shows that what the person said didn't bother them. And actually what they said was kind of stupid. And so they'll say really simple things like, whatever, or anyway, or yeah, and am I supposed to care? Is that supposed to be funny? And your point is, they'll roll their eyes, they'll shrug their shoulders, and they give this impression that what the person said didn't bother them. And that makes it not fun for the person who's teasing them. Now, we always have to be ready with at least a few comebacks. They don't always stop immediately. We also have to make sure the comebacks, make sense in that context. And then after a couple or a few comebacks, then we can walk away, then we can remove ourselves. So one of the things that we do a lot of in peers is we do a lot of role play demonstrations to show what certain skills are supposed to look like, or even what they're not supposed to look like. And so this is a role play of handling teasing. And in this video, you're going to see a person by the name of Gabe being teased. And we would introduce this role play by saying, watch this role play and think about what Gabe is doing right in handling this teasing.
Hey, dweeb, reading again?
Whatever.
You're such a loser. You're always reading.
Am I supposed to care?
Yeah, because everyone thinks you're a loser.
Anyway,
So we would time out the video. We'd ask, what did Gabe do right there? And then we would do a little perspective taking. So what was that like for the other person who was teasing him? Probably wasn't very fun. Probably wasn't what he expected. Maybe not very gratifying. What did he think of Gabe? Wasn't really bothered by the teasing. And would he want to tease Gabe again? Probably not, unless it was an extinction burst, which we do talk about in our groups. We don't use those technical terms, but we do say that, sometimes if the teaser's used to getting a certain reaction, they might try a little bit harder at first, but eventually if we continue to act like this doesn't bother us, and then they're going to move on. So lots of other strategies related to handling teasing, but that's kind of the snapshot of some of the strategies that we teach for handling teasing. Also important to think about other types of direct bullying. So handling physical bullying, for example. Again, thinking about what is physical bullying. This is, again, things like hitting, kicking, pushing. It's aggressive behavior, but it can also relate to things like stealing or pranking, pulling practical jokes. And the reason it's important to define the bullying first is that in order to choose the appropriate strategy, you have to know what you're dealing with. You have to define the bullying. If someone trips me in the hall and I fall, that's physical bullying, right? But am I going to turn around and say, and your point is? Like, that wouldn't make sense. That wouldn't be the right strategy. That's what we do in response to handling verbal bullying or teasing. Now, what are most young people told to do in response to physical bullying? Well, most people will say that they're told to tell an adult. And that is absolutely a strategy. It's one of the strategies that we do teach, but there also are a lot of other strategies that we can teach. And if this is a more minor type of physical bullying, sometimes telling an adult right away is not always the best first strategy. So for example, imagine that someone trips me in the hallway, right? And I fall and I go tell someone right away. I go tell a teacher. Well, what's going to happen? Well, it's probably my word against theirs. They could say it was an accident. They're probably not going to get in trouble. And now they're going to want to retaliate even further because I tried to get them into trouble. I could also get a bad reputation for being a snitch. There's a lot of, things that could happen. So depending on the type of physical bullying and how, if I'm in danger or something like that, of course, I need to tell an adult. But if it's a more minor form of bullying, there are other options of things to do. So we need to share that with the young people that we work with. So one of the most powerful strategies that a lot of young people use to handle physical bullying is they avoid the bully, right? So that means they stay out of reach of the bully. They often will know where the bully hangs out at certain times of the day in school. So they know the bully hangs out in a certain area at lunch, they'll avoid that area. They know the bully has a locker in a certain hallway, they'll avoid that hallway if they can. And if the idea is that if the bully can't find them, they can't bully them. And one of the ways that people will do this, sort of avoiding the bully, is they'll plan their route throughout the day. So a lot of kids have been successful at sort of planning their route throughout the day to keep themselves away from that bully. Now, we know that that strategy is not going to work 100% of the time. None of these strategies do work, by the way, 100% of the time for physical bullying, because if they did, we'd have one strategy, right? So there's going to be multiple strategies that we can use. And another is to lay low when the bully is around. Sometimes we can't avoid that bully. So when the bully's around, we just need to kind of keep a low profile. Don't draw a lot of attention to ourselves, because if the bully doesn't notice us, they maybe won't bully us. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, will do the opposite when they're being bullied. They'll sometimes try to engage the bully, or they'll try to be funny and charming and, witty, and think they're going to win the bully over or something. But what ends up happening is that they often have more attention placed on themselves, and that might lead to bullying, unfortunately. So laying low is not a bad strategy when the bully is around. And also, we don't want to provoke the bully, right? Don't do anything to upset that bully. So for example, using those strategies for handling teasing with the bully, using those short comebacks, is actually not a good idea with a physical bully, because that actually might provoke them. Think about it. When I say whatever, or, am I supposed to care? That's sort of embarrassing the bully, right? Well, if this is a physical bully who, sometimes they use words too to embarrass us. But if I embarrass that physical bully, what are they going to do? They're probably going to get physical. So using those strategies for handling teasing, probably not a good strategy with a physical bully. And also, we don't want to be teasing that bully. Now, kids who get physically bullied aren't any more likely to tease the bully that's physically, aggressing against them. But what happens is we'll sometimes have kids that will think they want to make friends with the bully, and they'll see the bully and their friends bantering. Banter is playful teasing among friends. And so our kid will see this, bully bantering with his friends, and he'll say, oh, that's how I'll make friends with them. I'll tease him. That's actually a really bad idea, right? Because that's going to be provocative, and that might actually result in more bullying, unfortunately. Also relating to provoking a bully, you also want to be careful not to police the bully. So this is a term that we use a lot in peers, where it's pointing out like little rule violations, like, maybe errors in grammar or something like that. We don't want to tell on the bully for minor offenses. If the bully shows up late to class, that's not really our business. Or if they're texting in class, that's also not our business. We don't want to police them around things like that. That's probably going to result and more bullying, unfortunately. But of course, if the bully brings a weapon to school, or someone could be in danger, there's some sort of serious consequence, then of course we need to tell someone, but we want to do that discreetly, and, obviously not share that with, the whole school that we did that. So again, want to avoid trying to be provocative in these ways. Another common social error, unfortunately, that a lot of young people make when it comes to physical bullying is they try to make friends with the bully. Well, why do they do that? Well, they're probably trying to get them to stop bullying them. And they think that if they make friends with them, that they'll stop bullying them. But that actually just puts you in the way of the bully, and might even draw some unwanted attention to you. And, that bully might maybe manipulate you and pretend that they're friends with you, and then they'll actually continue to bully you. But either way, bullies don't tend to make great friends. So trying to make friends with a bully, not always a great strategy, usually results in more bullying. Instead, another really, really successful strategy is to hang out with other people. Think about this. Who do bullies want to pick on? The kid who's alone or in a group? Well, they want to pick on the kid who's alone. And why is that? Because you're an easy target if you're alone, right? There's no one there to defend you, to stick up for you, to have your back, and the bully knows that. So they pick on the kids who are alone. But simply hanging out with other people is going to be a great strategy to avoid physical bullying, right? That means we don't walk to class alone. We don't eat lunch alone. We should be with other people, because we know they're probably not going to pick a fight with a group of people. Now, we know some of kids that get physically bullied, they maybe don't have a lot of friends, and that could be an issue for them as well. Again, not all of these strategies work all of the time. Building up those social supports certainly will also help to lessen that type of bullying, because again, bullies tend to pick on the kids who are alone. Another strategy that we can use is to stay near people in authority when the bully is around. So what happens is a lot of kids get bullied, unfortunately, during the lunch hour at school. This is when time is less structured, there's less adult supervision, and unfortunately, there's a lot of physical bullying happening at that time. And so what a lot of kids do is they'll go to the library or their favorite teacher's classroom. And why do they do that? Well, they do that because they know they're safe there. But we're not going to suggest that, because we actually want our kids to be socially engaged with their peers and not hiding, in the library or in a classroom with the teacher because they're afraid. So instead, they could just stay near people in authority when the bully is around. So that doesn't mean go up and strike up a conversation with the lunch monitor, but maybe sit near the lunch monitor during lunchtime. A lot of physical bullying also happens, sadly, on the school bus. And where does the bullying usually happen on the school bus? It usually happens in the back of the bus. And so where could our kids sit if they didn't want to be physically bullied? They could sit up at the front near the bus driver. Again, doesn't mean they have to strike up a conversation with the bus driver, but just being around those adults is going to be protective because the bully is not going to bother them in front of adults. And then finally, we said one of the strategies that a lot of young people get is they're told to get help from supportive adults or people in authority. And that is absolutely a strategy, and should be used, particularly if they are in danger or there's some kind of, physical threat that seems to not be working with all these other strategies. But we can give them other strategies as well. And so if they were to get help from a supportive adult, who might that be? You always want to clarify that, right? So they'll often mention their teacher and the principal at school. They'll mention, their guidance counselor or school psychologist, the nurse. They'll mention even the security guard at school, but they'll sometimes not think about their parents. And this is particularly true among autistic youth. They'll sometimes not mention parents. And I think it's because, especially for neurodivergent youth, they tend to be very context specific. And because parents aren't at school, they don't always think to get help from parents. But often parents can really be the most helpful in these situations. So that should be an option as well. Okay, so those are some strategies for handling direct bullying. Now let's talk about indirect bullying. So one of the forms of indirect bullying, as I mentioned earlier, is cyberbullying. And so what are most young people told to do in response to cyberbullying? Well, they're usually told to ignore it. And this is actually one of those times where we're not necessarily given such bad advice. That's actually pretty decent advice. There's more that we can teach kids to do, but ignoring it is not a bad strategy. It's actually pretty ecologically valid. But it's also helpful to think about, well, what does the bully want us to do? Always useful to try to get into the mind of the bully, because we don't want to do what the bully wants us to do. That's going to be reinforcing. They're more likely to bully us. So instead, what they want us to do is they want us to react, and any reaction will do. And so that's why it's really important that instead of reacting, we do this thing we call don't feed the trolls. And some of you might have heard that expression before. It's used online. Trolls are like, internet cyberbullies. Basically, they're people who kind of troll the internet, picking fights, trying to get a reaction out of people. And so the expression don't feed the trolls means don't react. That when you react to a troll or a cyberbully, because they're looking for that reaction, you're actually making the troll stronger, essentially. And so you're making it fun for them. So any reaction is actually going to feed those trolls. It's going to make them stronger. So instead, we don't want to react. Otherwise we're going to be empowering them and making them want to cyberbully us more. Now, related to that, that sort of involves this idea about those teasing comebacks. And remember when I was saying it's important to define the bullying before you choose a strategy? Well, a lot of cyberbullying includes teasing, but online or over electronics. And so it looks like teasing on the surface, but those comebacks that we talked about, like saying whatever, or am I supposed to care? They don't work over electronics because they're just words on a screen, right? They don't have the same affect. Unless you're on a phone call or a video chat where you actually can, use the audio kind of visual part of that to convey a tone of either being, bored or, indifferent, or maybe even kind of having an attitude. Unless you're on those types of electronics, this isn't going to work. And so again, better to not feed the trolls. Maybe don't use those teasing comebacks unless it's happening over video or audio. Another powerful strategy for handling cyberbullying is to have a friend stick up for you. I think cyberbullies are a lot like, kind of in real life, in-person bullies, where they want to pick on the person who's alone and seems unprotected. And so if somebody sticks up for you when you're being cyberbullied, they usually back down from that. It can also be a same-aged family member that can stick up for you, like a sibling or a cousin. Again, they'll back down in those situations often, but it doesn't include a parent, sadly. We really want to avoid having parents directly confront cyberbullies. You probably heard stories of parents doing that, and then the parent gets in trouble because they're accused of harassing this child. And, so there's other things that parents can do, but directly confronting the cyberbully is probably not going to be helpful, could result in the parent getting in trouble, and actually may cause a lot of gossip for that child, people talking about that happening. Another really powerful strategy too for handling cyberbullying is to lay low online. So imagine if I'm being cyberbullied over Instagram, should I keep trying to post on Instagram? Well, maybe not right now, maybe lay low for a little while. Probably shouldn't be posting or even commenting on my friend's social media, and just let the cyberbullying die down. Like let things calm down a little bit. In very extreme cases, people will even consider suspending their accounts, briefly. That's not always necessary, but at least laying low for a little while might be a good strategy. The interesting thing about cyberbullying too is we've been monitoring cyberbullying for a couple of decades now. And, 20 plus years ago, cyberbullying was very different than it is now. I mean, electronic communication has changed as well, and social media. But I recall, over 20 years ago, the frustration often about cyberbullying was that it was largely anonymous. You didn't know who was doing this. People would post, we hate so-and-so, like forums and websites, or people would prank call people and things like that. And it was sort of anonymous. Well, that's completely changed. And more often than not, people do know who's cyberbullying them. And so because of that, one of the most effective strategies for handling cyberbullying is to block the cyberbully, right? If the bully can't, contact you, then they can't bully you. So that involves things like blocking them on your phone, if they're sending harassing text messages, blocking them on your social media. A lot of cyberbullying also happens on social media through the tags and the comments. And so if I'm being cyberbullied through tags and comments, I could go into my privacy settings and require that I either approve or block tags and comments, right? So approving would be nobody can tag me or comment on my social media unless I approve it. And blocking means no one can tag me or comment at all. I'm not crazy about the blocking completely, because that's kind of the fun of social media for young people, is that it's interactive, but it is an option if kids are being cyberbullied. We also want kids and their parents really to be using and checking privacy settings regularly on social media. The privacy settings change a lot on social media, and so there are things we can do to protect kids from being cyberbullied. Definitely not having things be public is a good start. Their social media should be private. And they also shouldn't be sending or accepting friend requests from strangers. We know a lot of kids do that. A lot of adults do that too. Why do they do that? Well, they want to, have a lot of friends and appear to be really popular. But, everyone knows you don't have 5,000 friends. So if you have 5,000 people following you, it's because, you're accepting or sending friend requests to strangers. But that's a little dangerous when it comes to cyberbullying and other things, because it's allowing strangers to view and comment on your social media, and that can actually open kids up to cyberbullying. Another thing we have to think about is, if the cyberbullying gets a little out of hand and we might even need to report it, it's often reported to school, because cyberbullying often happens across classmates and in schools. What's the first thing that school is going to ask for? They're going to ask for the evidence, right? That's going to be important. They're going to want to see what's going on. And that's why another strategy for handling cyberbullying is to save the evidence. And, that doesn't mean you keep the harassing messages on your social media where anyone can see them, but you can simultaneously save the evidence and delete it. And people do that by taking a screenshot or do a screen recording and then delete that post or that comment, whatever that happens to be. But you do need to save the evidence. We also suggest that kids get help from supportive adults or people in authority. So you want to talk about who those people might be. It's often teachers and school administration that they get help from, or parents. And this is particularly important because, in more extreme cases, if we have to report the cyberbullying, we're going to want to get help from a supportive adult in doing that. And that usually involves parent involvement. Now, if we were to report the cyberbullying, it's also important to think about where that would happen. So if I'm being harassed on Instagram or cyberbullied there, who could we report it to? Well, we could report it to Instagram, and they take these things very seriously. They even, suspend people's accounts because of instances of cyberbullying. Also service providers. So if I'm getting harassing text messages on my phone, who could I report it to? Verizon or AT&T. More often, though, it's reported at school. If it's happening in the work setting, it might be to a supervisor or boss. And in really extreme cases, cyberbullying sometimes gets reported to law enforcement. And it's important for us all to know, especially as mental health professionals, that cyberbullying is often illegal in many jurisdictions, really across the globe, and even punishable by law. And it's a pretty extreme measure. This isn't something we want kids to decide on their own, but in really extreme cases, it is an option if everything else hasn't really worked. Now, law enforcement takes cyberbullying very seriously, and I often ask people why they think that might be. And this is where people will often, share stories about suicide and suicide attempts. We hear about that a lot, sadly, in the media, that, often cyberbullying can result in that. And I do think that that's one of the reasons why law enforcement takes cyberbullying so seriously. But I would also argue there's another reason, and that is that with cyberbullying, it's the only type of bullying where there will always be evidence. Right? I mean, I think it's pretty serious if someone, punches you or physically attacks you, right? But that's sometimes your word against theirs. There may not be witnesses. Cyberbullying, there will always be a witness, right? There will always be evidence for this. And so they have to take it seriously, which is another reason why we need to save that evidence. Now, just a final point about cyberbullying, there's also something called cyber banter. Now, cyber banter is basically playful teasing among friends, but over electronic communication. And sometimes kids are unsure what to do in those situations if they're being sort of cyber bantered by their friends. We don't want them to use those teasing comebacks like we talked about before, because they're just words on a screen. They don't convey that tone. It doesn't work so well. We can only use those verbal comebacks really with, again, audio or video-based cyber banter, like phone calls and video chats. However, what we could do if we were being cyber bantered, again, this is playful teasing among friends, you could consider using like a GIF or a GIF, however you want to say it, or a meme in response to cyber banter. So the GIF or the meme it has to convey the tone of indifference. And you see the example I have on the screen. So that's sort of taking that brief comeback that we talked about with teasing and turning it into a GIF of like whatever, and she's rolling her eyes. If you don't respond to the cyber banter with your friends, you could actually appear weak, and that could be leading to more of the cyber banter. So in this case, because it's this more playful teasing among friends, you may have to actually do more than that whole ignoring the cyber banter, the don't feed the trolls response, don't react. That actually could create some problems among a friend group. But we also need to remember that friendship is a choice. And, if the cyber banter bothers you, then maybe this is not a good friend choice for you. So also something to consider. All right, our final type of bullying that we're going to talk about this morning relates to also another indirect form of bullying, and that is rumors and gossip. And so again, when we ask a lot of young people what they're told to do in response to rumors and gossip, they're often told to ignore it, which again isn't the worst strategy. It's not a terrible strategy, but there are other things we could do that we could share with them. But what's sort of fascinating in having, researched rumors and gossip for a couple of decades now is that I've discovered that when it comes to rumors and gossip, every instinct we have is wrong, like every instinct. All right. So what are some of the instincts? Well, one of the things that happens when, if we're the target of rumors and gossip is that we want to disprove it, right? We want to defend ourselves, want to tell everybody that it's not true. But think about that. If we go around trying to disprove the gossip, what do we look like to other people? If I'm going to everyone saying, no, I heard that rumor. It's not true. Don't believe it. It never happened. I could have a mountain of evidence that this rumor is not true, but I look guilty when I'm talking about it because I look defensive. That's the issue with trying to disprove the gossip or disprove the rumor is that, even if you have all this evidence, you still look defensive, which makes you look guilty. And, there's always going to be people who believe that rumor. And in fact, the new rumor might be like how you're all upset about the rumor, you're trying to disprove it, and it adds fuel to the rumor mill. And you're actually making it worse for yourself, not better. So to give an example that might strike at home, for adults that maybe haven't been in this environment recently, think about celebrities. Celebrities sometimes get gossiped about, and think about the celebrities that go around trying to disprove the gossip. They'll even, sue the tabloid that printed the gossip, right? And have you ever heard of a celebrity suing some tabloid over some rumor you never heard about in the first place? Right? So it's actually adding fuel to the rumor mill, and there's always going to be people who believe it. So rather than trying to disprove the gossip, we're going to do something far more clever that will discredit the importance or the believability of this gossip. We're not quite there yet, though. We still have to get at what are all these instincts that we have that are all wrong. Well, another instinct relates to how it feels to be gossiped about. So how does it feel when someone is spreading a rumor about you? Well, it's really upsetting, of course, but you can't appear to be upset. Because as soon as you appear to be upset, you look guilty, right? And now the new rumor is how upset you are. And now everyone's talking about that. People are always looking for new angles to the gossip, things to talk about. So you're actually making it worse for yourself, not better. So you can't appear to be upset. In fact, you really have to act like the rumor doesn't bother you. Don't show other people that that this is affecting you in any way. That'll make it less likely that people will want to spread the gossip if you act like it doesn't bother you. And in this situation, you also have to be kind of careful about who you disclose your true feelings to. Like you might tell your best friend that you're really upset, thinking that you can trust that they won't say anything, but then they go tell one of their friends, oh, I feel so bad for Liz. She's really upset about this rumor. And then they're inadvertently sort of spreading the gossip. And now everyone's going to start talking about that. So you really have to act like the rumor doesn't bother you. Of course, you want to talk to parents and, caregivers, therapists, those are the people that you probably can rely on to talk about your true feelings. Okay, more instincts. Remember, we said every instinct we have is wrong when it comes to rumors and gossip. Well, let's imagine that I know who's spreading the gossip about me. What am I going to want to do? Well, I'm going to want to confront that person, right? I'm going to want to go up to them and tell them to stop doing this. But remember, every instinct we have is wrong. Can you imagine what would happen if I went up to this person and told them to stop gossiping about me? Like I say, I know you're spreading this rumor about me. You seriously need to stop. That's not cool. What do you think they're going to say? Are they going to say, oh yeah, Liz, you're right. I shouldn't do that. You know what? Don't worry. I'll go tell everybody it's not true. I got your back. I'll take care of it. Is that ever going to happen? That's never going to happen. And if anything, they're very unlikely to apologize. They're very unlikely to stop spreading the rumor. They might even feel justified now because we went and confronted them. They might want to retaliate further. And at the very least, that's amazing gossip. I just confronted that person. Who's not going to be talking about that? So again, every instinct we have is wrong. The new rumor in this case would be how I confronted the person. And now everyone's talking about that. It's adding fuel to the rumor mill. And again, I made it worse for myself, not better. All right. So instead of confronting the source of the gossip, I actually have to avoid whoever's spreading this gossip. If I happen to know who it is, I need to stay away from them because no matter what I do, I can't do anything right. Imagine it's lunchtime and everybody knows that I know that this person is spreading this gossip about me. What is everybody doing? Well, they're watching, right? They're waiting. They're waiting for me to confront this person. And again, I can't do anything right. If I never look over at the person, what are they going to say? Oh, she's scared. She won't even look at them, right? If I happen to look over at them, what will they say? Ooh, did you see how she looked at her? She gave her the evil eye. Like, this is just not helping my situation. I need to avoid that person. That means if I know if they hang out in a certain area at lunchtime, I'm going to try to avoid being in that area if I can. If they're going to some party this weekend, I have other plans. So it doesn't mean you stop going to school, right? That's also going to create more gossip because you appear to be upset, but really just in general, trying to kind of plan your route, sort of avoid being around that person, sort of laying low when they're around if you can't avoid them. All right, so that's a lot of what not to do, a lot of common social errors that people might make related to the instincts, related to rumors and gossip. Now let's be more proactive. And so what happens is that when you're the target of rumors and gossip, people are not only talking behind your back, but they'll even come up to you and they'll ask you questions about the rumor. And again, the instinct is going to be to deny and disprove, but that makes you look guilty because you look defensive. So instead, what you do is you're going to just act amazed that anybody would believe or care about the gossip. Right. And by acting amazed, anyone believes the gossip, you're discrediting the believability of the gossip. And by acting amazed that anyone would care about the gossip, you're discrediting the importance of the gossip. So some strategies here in terms of like acting amazed, anyone would believe the gossip. You could say things like, I can't believe anyone would believe that. Or people are so gullible. People will believe anything. I don't sound defensive when I say that. It's not really fun for you to believe that, is it? Also, when you act amazed, anyone would care about the gossip. You're saying things like, can you believe anyone cares about that? Like, people need to get a life. People need to get a hobby. Find something interesting to talk about, right? So again, I'm not bothered by this. And it makes it less fun to gossip about these things because, again, you're discrediting the importance or the believability. It doesn't even matter if the rumor is true. If the rumor is true, you can't believe anyone cares about it, right? If the rumor is not true, you can't believe anyone believes it. So this is great if people come up to you and ask you about the rumor, but you can be even more proactive than that. And this is where we teach kids to do this thing. I call it spread the rumor about yourself. Okay, so that sounds crazy. Who would do that? Well, I know it sounds crazy. I want it to be memorable, right? This is a really, really powerful strategy. So what people will often do in this situation is they'll first, number one, find a supportive friend. And they don't tell their friend they're about to do this. It's just someone that they know will kind of agree with them, kind of have their back. And they also find an audience, right? So when you're the target of a rumor or some gossip, one of the things that's happening is everyone's kind of eavesdropping on your conversations and they're sort of like paying attention to what you're talking about. So you might take the opportunity like at lunchtime when people are around or right before class starts, when you have an audience and people are kind of listening to your conversation, and you're going to acknowledge the rumor to this supportive friend. And you start by saying, did you hear this rumor? And then you fill in the blank. And you don't get into the juicy details, just very brief. Did you hear the rumor? And it doesn't matter if your friend heard the rumor or not, right? But what you're going to do next is you're going to just simply act amazed that anybody would believe or care about the gossip. So you're saying things like, I can't even believe anyone would believe that. Or, people are so gullible and people need to get a life, or people need to find something interesting to talk about. All of those statements that we talked about earlier, you're going to be acting amazed that anyone would care or believe about the gossip. And this is your supportive friend, so they're probably going to be agreeing with you. And then the fifth step is to repeat this with other supportive friends. You're not going to just do this once. You're going to do this multiple times with other people. And what you're going to do in the process is you're going to make it not fun to spread the gossip. And maybe the new rumor is that, how stupid the old rumor was. And it just makes it not fun for people to talk about it. And that's about as close as you're going to get to killing the gossip. Because once a rumor is out there, it's very difficult to disprove it. There's always going to be people that believe it, even if with a mountain of evidence. And so you just want to make it not fun for people to talk about it. Now, because the instinct is so strong to deny or disprove, it's really easy to mess this up. And so we actually show an inappropriate example first of spreading the rumor about yourself. And we'll ask kids, watch this rumor. And in this video, you're going to see a person by the name of Alina. And watch this role play and think about what Alina is doing wrong here and spreading this rumor about herself.
Oh my God, Allison, did you hear that rumor that I have a crush on James?
Yeah, I did hear that.
That is so not true. I mean, he's like not even my type at all. You know my type. It's like tall and dark hair. He's none of that. And we have no common interests. Like it's so not true.
I mean, yeah, if you say so.
Like who would believe that? That's insane.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's crazy.
Okay, so we would time out. We'd ask what Alina did wrong there. Well, a couple of things that she did wrong. First of all, you should know that, the person in the video with her, Allison, was her supportive friend. So check, she got that. And you were her audience. So check, she got that too. But there were two things she was doing wrong. And one of them had to do with her affect, right? She's clearly upset. She's definitely emotionally charged. And as soon as you look upset, you look guilty. So that's not good. And the other thing she was doing wrong was she tried to disprove the gossip, right? She tried to prove it, you know me, I like tall and he's none of that. And so right away, as soon as you try to disprove the gossip, you look guilty again, because you're looking defensive. So this is not what we're relating to here when we're talking about spreading the rumor about yourself. It's also helpful to do a little perspective taking here too. Like, what was that like for Alina's friend? Well, probably not very believable. And what does she think of Alina? She thinks she has a crush on James, right? And kind of protesting, but maybe has a crush on James. And, she probably wouldn't want to spread the original gossip, but anyone who overheard that, what would they say? Well, they probably say, oh yeah, I know she was trying to say she doesn't have a crush on him, but you can tell she really does. That's actually not helping your cause. That actually might spread more rumors and not less. So instead, again, we have to give this impression that we're amazed anyone would believe or care about the rumor. So now watch this role play and think about what Alina is doing right this time and spreading the rumor about herself.
So Allison, did you hear that rumor that I have a crush on James?
Yeah, I did hear that.
Like seriously, who would believe that?
Seriously, I don't know.
Like, by the way, find something more interesting to talk about.
I know, right?
I mean, people need to get a life.
Really?
Like get a hobby or something.
They really do.
So lame.
So.
Okay, so we would time out. We'd ask what Alina did right there and do a little perspective taking. What was that like for her friend this time? It was pretty believable, right? What did she think of Alina? Doesn't really have a crush on James, right? And again, her friend probably would never have spread the rumor, but people who overheard that, would they want to spread the original rumor? I mean, it kind of makes it seem kind of stupid that you believed it or cared about it. So again, this is probably about as close as we're going to get to killing that rumor. And we're going to repeat this with other supportive friends. All right, so that was a snapshot of, 4 of the different types of bullying and the strategies that we use for combating those types of bullying. While I have you, I also want to share a little bit of background about our program and some of the research. I mentioned that Peers is one of the only evidence-based social skills interventions for youth. And so I'm going to show you with you a little meta-analysis that was conducted actually at UC San Francisco by colleagues that we actually don't even work with, but they did a meta-analysis on Peers for our adolescent parent-assisted program. And in this meta-analysis, what they did was they surveyed over, I think it was 1,300 papers. They narrowed it down to about a dozen papers that were all empirical articles on social skills training that were using the Peers intervention that had some type of appropriate outcome measures. And they ended with about a dozen studies, and they looked at effect sizes across various outcomes. So just as a reminder to the group, if this isn't familiar, so effect sizes really tell us, how meaningful a relationship is between variables. A large effect size means that the research has some kind of practical significance. And so a large effect size would be 0.8 or higher. Medium effect size is 0.5-ish, around that area. And then 0.2 would be like a small effect size, doesn't have as much practical significance. So they first looked at a number of papers that looked at the task. It's the test of adolescent social skills knowledge, and it looks at what it sounds like, social skills knowledge in general, and they found large effect sizes across all of the studies. I have also here on the right side of the screen, just an example from one paper on our teen parent assisted program. This is for adolescents on the autism spectrum, that we typically see about a 10-point increase in the task from pre to post test in those receiving Peers versus those who are in a control no treatment condition. We also found in this paper medium to large effect sizes in terms of overall social skills on a measure called the Social Skills Improvement System. And the Social Skills Improvement System is kind of considered to be the gold standard for assessing social skills. It's a measure developed by Gresham and Elliott, and it uses standard scores with a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15. And again, we see medium to large effect sizes. And many studies show, as you see here on the right, about anywhere from like a 10 to 12 point standard score improvement from pre to post test in those who receive peers immediately with very little change in the control condition. One of the more sensitive measures in detecting changes in peers is the social responsiveness scale. This is an autism screening tool that uses T-scores. And here the researchers found medium to large effect sizes in the peers different peers research studies. And you see there on the right, the bar graph represents our typical outcomes where we see more than a standard deviation change often on the social responsiveness scale in the peers condition from pre to post test, with very little happening in the control condition. And then finally, this meta-analysis also looked at social engagement, both according to teen report and also parent report. So this would be the frequency of get-togethers in the previous month. And here's where you see a little bit more variability with small to large effect sizes. So in our own research at UCLA and other research that's been conducted in North America, typically we see about 4 additional get-togethers in the previous month following peers with very little change in our control conditions. I should mention that these get-togethers are not with members of the treatment group. These are people unaffiliated with our program. But if you take a look at the small to large effect sizes in the meta-analysis, you're seeing the smaller effect sizes in parts of the world where get-togethers are less common. It maybe wasn't the best measure actually of success in the program. So the Schum paper, for example, and from 2019, it comes out of Hong Kong. The Rabin paper is out of Israel. The U paper is out of South Korea. And these are parts of the world where get-togethers with peers are just less common throughout the week. And so there's other ways that kids socially engage their peers, and that might actually explain some of the differences in effect sizes. It's just maybe not culturally as relevant or valid as a measure of instrument and change. Okay, so that's just a very quick snapshot of one meta-analysis that was done on peers, but would also like to share just in these last few moments kind of what's new and what's happening in the peers clinic at UCLA. Some of you might be familiar with Peers for Careers. This is a college to career transition program. We just completed a large randomized control trial with 106 autistic adults who were participating in a 20-week program that's focused on the soft skills related to finding and maintaining employment. And I am collaborating on that study with Dr. Amanda Galsrud from the CAN clinic here at UCLA. And that study is now completed, but we actually are seeking funding to not only test this intervention again, but also to add employer supports. So not only teaching the soft skills related to finding and maintaining employment, but also provide supports to employers to create more supportive work environments for neurodivergent adults. So again, this study is focusing on autistic adults seeking employment. We also just completed a large randomized control trial for Peers for Dating, which is a 16-week program for autistic adults that are interested in developing and maintaining romantic relationships. In both of these studies, we used peer-mediated coaching. So these were undergraduate or graduate students that provided coaching to our autistic adults, either around employment or in this case, dating. We did complete a study recently with over 100 autistic adults, and we are going to be launching another study starting in early 2024, comparing in-person delivery of this intervention versus remote delivery. So in both of those randomized control trials for both Peers for Careers and Peers for Dating, those happened during COVID. And so everything was taught remotely over Zoom. And so now we're also investigating how that looks in person. Finally, the third RCT that we just completed was with Dr. Jim McCracken through our Autism Center of Excellence grant. And this was using peers with both autistic teens and adults in combination with the drug L-DOPA. So many of you might be familiar with L-DOPA as a drug for Parkinson's patients. But the idea here that actually Jim McCracken had in using this drug with autistic teens and adults was that, L-DOPA increases the amount of dopamine in the brain, which of course is very much related to things like feelings of reward and pleasure. And so we were wondering, hey, if we could increase the amounts of dopamine in the brain, could we make socialization more rewarding? And so we're comparing that L-DOPA drug to a placebo. All right, so more to come on that. Just finally, to wrap us up, I also want to share some of the clinical services and resources that we have here at UCLA. So we run 2 back-to-back groups every week on Mondays for Peers for Young Adults. We have them both in person and virtual. So there are options for both, and these are run through the healthcare system. So people often just use their insurance to attend our programs. Same thing for Peers for Adolescents. Right now, we're running 4 adolescent groups every week, 2 in person and 2 online. And those run throughout the year. Again, people often access them through the managed healthcare system. We also have remote educational classes for people who are Zooming in from all over the globe. And these are courses that are taught like a class. So it doesn't go through a healthcare system. It's more of a course. And again, people can Zoom in from wherever they are and learn about making and keeping friends. We also have a course focused on dating etiquette as well for both teens and young adults. They're separated by age, of course, and all of these programs are parent or caregiver assisted. We also have Peers for Preschoolers, which is a program for 4 to 6-year-old children. And it's not just for autistic youth. A lot of my research focuses on those on the autism spectrum, but really our clinical programs are open to anybody who wants to learn the skills that we're teaching. And so this is a parent-assisted program about friendships for young children. We also have in-person boot camps at UCLA throughout the summer. They're offered 5 times a year, and they're topical boot camps. We have a friendship boot camp, a conversation boot camp, a bully-proofing boot camp, and we also have a dating boot camp. They meet in the Semmel Auditorium on a Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We welcome teens and young adults, and we also allow accompanying parents to attend for free. All right, so in terms of just some final resources, we also have a virtual boot camp for people who can't maybe access our programs in person or online, but want to learn the skills that we teach. It includes 35 pre-recorded episodes that covers all of the skills that we teach in Peers, so families can kind of go at their own pace, and it's available on a YouTube channel that never expires. We also have a library of over 100 role play videos on the UCLA Peers Clinic website. This is the QR code to access those, but you could just go to the Peers Clinic website and access all of those videos that you saw today and many more related to different topics around friendship and handling conflict and rejection. We also have a free Peers app, which is available for both Android and iOS devices. And it has all of the skills that we teach in our adolescent and young adult programs, and sort of operates like a video game where you go through different levels, and there's role play videos and different, rules and steps of social etiquette. There's a little quiz at the end to get you to the next level, and even corresponding homework assignments to practice the skills. We also have a book called The Science of Making Friends that I wrote for families that maybe can't access a Peers program, but want to learn more about the skills that we teach in Peers. If you haven't checked out the show Love on the Spectrum, this is a really lovely Netflix show that highlights the journey of autistic adults looking for love. And if you're interested in our boot camps, particularly our dating boot camp, the first season of Love on the Spectrum in Australia featured a dating boot camp that I did in Sydney, Australia. So check that out if you haven't seen that show. It's very sweet and charming, even if you're not interested in the dating boot camp. Finally, we do trainings throughout the year. So we do certified 3-day training seminars over Zoom. We do them for our parent-assisted teen program every November and April, for our young adult program every February and September, and for our school-based curriculum every June. And we do offer free registration to our UCLA faculty, staff, and trainees. So please let us know if you're interested in attending. We are always happy to support our UCLA community. But these training seminars are open to people, mental health professionals and educators across the globe. And then finally, for any trainees on the call, please know that the Peers Clinic is a training clinic, and we do welcome trainees that want to do electives. in our various programs. And so feel free to reach out if you have more questions about that. This is our contact information. But I thank you all for your attention and your interest and the opportunity to share more about these bully proofing strategies for young people. And with that, I will toss it over to Dr. Mogul for our Q&A. So thank you.
Thank you so much for such an informative and engaging talk. It's always so wonderful to learn from you. And after like maybe 20 years of knowing you, maybe more, I don't know. It never stops. I learn from you every single time we engage. So thank you for that. We do have some good questions in the Q&A. I wanted to pop one up to you, which is, you've done so many amazing things to make the wonderful evidence-based, ecologically valid strategies available to people in, apps and a million, languages and across the world. What tends to be the most challenging point for either the kids or their their parents or caregivers or support person?
I mean, probably one of the more challenging issues that will come up is, well, what do you do as a parent if your kid doesn't want to learn these skills? If they don't want to attend a program like peers. I mentioned early in my talk that we only open this program up to kids and adults that want to learn the skills. I don't think it's ethical to force social skills, training onto people who don't want to learn the skills. I also think it's not ethical to withhold these types of programs either. So that's the other side of it. But, if you're a parent and you're desperate to help your kid, but your kid doesn't want to participate, that is probably the biggest struggle I often hear from families. And in that case, what I will recommend is that, parents at least get informed. I talked about the ecological validity of these skills and the importance of that. It's really important that when parents are giving advice to their kids, because they will invariably do that the advice that they give is good advice. And really well-intentioned adults will often give really bad advice when it comes to bullying in particular. That whole ignore, walk away, tell an adult, all that related to teasing, that doesn't work. And so by just simply informing yourself as a parent about what does work, that's a good step in the right direction. But I would say that's often the biggest challenge that we find with families.
Thank you for saying that. I think when I first became involved in peers, I learned so much, and I've used that information in other settings when I'm engaging with families. And I know you mentioned that there is an elective available and trainings available to UCLA faculty and staff and trainees. And I really encourage anyone who has the time and ability or interest to take advantage of that, because it's quite a sweet offering. Okay, so one of the questions is, would you recommend for parents to keep screenshots and involve the other child's parent? I know you covered some of this.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that parents keep screenshots of any type of cyberbullying. And that's what this is referring to, I imagine. Whether or not you involve the other family depends on your relationship with the other family. If you have a close relationship, then you have to think about how that would affect your relationship with that family. Maybe they would be open to hearing that. Families, parents get very defensive very quickly when they hear instances of their children bullying others. I find they get defensive and defend their children more readily than they believe it, honestly. So it's often helpful to have some type of mediator in that situation. So having the school maybe involved would be a better solution if you don't really know the other family. I definitely wouldn't just kind of cold call the other family and let them know what was going on. That is not a good idea. Where it gets complicated is if you actually know the other family, because then involving the school might be harmful to your friendship with that other family. So I think getting guidance also from mental health professionals, from educators about what to do can be helpful. But it really does depend on the relationship you have with the other parents, and probably some form of mediation is always probably a little bit safer.
Thank you for that. There's a couple more questions. And if for those of you who are still thinking about questions, please go ahead and put them in. I think we have a few more minutes to answer them. Okay, so sometimes bullying happens in families. Siblings, cousins, and even parents can bully neurodiverse children and adults. do you have anything to add about family bullying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, it totally depends on who the family member is. If it's a sibling, or a same age cousin, you can use the strategies that we talked about, especially if it tends to be more verbal bullying in those situations. You can use the strategies for handling teasing, like saying whatever, or, those short comebacks, and your point is that sort of thing. And those work pretty well. And one of the questions sometimes that comes up there is, well, maybe the sibling knows that their kid is, or their sibling is going through peers and they know that they're learning these skills, and they'll ask, well, does it still work if the sibling knows that they're learning these strategies? And, honestly, this came up in the school setting when we started doing all basically interventions for an entire school. Would these strategies work if the bully knew about the strategies? And we didn't know initially if it would work. We said, I guess we'll find out. Turned out it did work out for that situation and also for siblings, because what would happen is, the kid who's getting bullied would say, so what, or who cares, and your point is, and the bully, whether it's a sibling or not, would say, oh, that's just one of those peers things. And then they would say, and your point is, like, it still worked, so that's good. So if it's a sibling or same aged family member, you can use a lot of those strategies. You can't always avoid, if it's physical, you can't always avoid, your family member. That's a different thing. We should get parents involved right away. But if it's an adult, this is where it starts to get really complicated, because one of the things we teach kids is not to use those comebacks with adults. You can't, what's the problem with saying whatever to your mom, or your dad? Well, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to seem disrespectful. So we don't use those types of comebacks there, but we do teach strategies for conflict resolution. And sometimes family members don't even realize that the things that they're saying are hurtful or might even be considered bullying. And so we teach sort of the strategies for how to bring up a disagreement, which often involve things like I statements. I feel like this when this happens. And so I don't have enough time to get into all of the different steps, but there are very specific ecologically valid strategies for bringing up that kind of conflict.
Thank you so, Thank you so much, Dr. Laugeson. I know a final question is, people want to know if this video or PowerPoint will be available to them. And I can say that in a few days, this whole recording will be available on the CAP Fellowship webpage, which is capfellowship.semel.ucla.edu/grand-rounds/. So please feel free to access it there. And I know people will be eager to learn more, about this particular talk, but all the other strategies too. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your wisdom.
Well, thank you so much to you as well. And have a good rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.